On Larry King Now, Bill Maher, the outspoken TV host on religion in America.
Liberals, I think, have very fuzzy thinking, and they say things like, all religions are alike. No, they're not. If you went and asked Muslims all around the world, do you think it's okay to bring violence on someone who insults the prophet? I think you would get an extraordinary percentage of them who said, yes, that is one area where it is okay.
On Clint Eastwood at the RNC.
I had no idea he was like that. He's such a typical teabagger, you know, doesn't know the facts. This old white guy who feels the claw being pried off the lever of power.
Plus,
denying that racism exists. That to me is very racist. If you ask the people on Planet Teabag, what's the problem racially in America? It's probably reverse racism, Larry. White people who cannot get a break because of all these affirmative action laws. They really believe that.
That's next on Larry King Now. Thanks for joining us on part 2 of Larry King Now. His talk show, Real Time with Bill Maher, airs weekly on HBO. Great show. And he appears many times in venues all over the country. The stand-up of Bill Maher. In fact, I did a stand-up once in St. Louis, and Bill Maher attended that for Bob Costas' charity.
I mean, you are a real public speaker. I mean, you have your stories.
Thank you.
You get up at that podium, you kill.
You liked Clint Eastwood at the convention.
I liked his performance as a comedian. What I admired was a man who could get on a stage with no teleprompter and just a chair as a prop and get big laughs for 15 minutes, sort of off the cuff. That is not easy. I mean, I've been a stand-up comedian for 30 years. I know what it's like, and I know what it's like to bomb from my early days. And for him to do that as a non-comedian in that setting with those limitations, I was very impressed. Now, the content of what he said shocked me, because I did not know that Clint Eastwood was such a down-the-line right-wing asshole. I knew he was sort of conservative, you know, but I had no idea he was like that. He's such a typical teabagger, you know, doesn't know the facts, had everything all wrong, just, you know, this old white guy who feels the claw being pried off the lever of power in America by the blacks and the Kenyans and the socialists, and he doesn't like it. He doesn't like that claw being pried off. And so he just retreats into the fantasy world that is the Planet Teabag that they live on.
Bill O'Reilly is going to debate Jon Stewart.
But I would still see his movie.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. I still like him as an artist.
What about baseball?
Yeah, any movie with Clint Eastwood.
What do you make of the O'Reilly-Stewart debate?
You know, I debated Ann Coulter a few years ago.
On pay-per-view?
No, I don't know. It was definitely not on pay-per-view. We did Radio City.
Yeah?
Yeah, we did 3 cities, New York, Boston, and Chicago, I think. And it's a lot of fun, you know, I mean, especially during an election year. Why not?
You're a critic of Fox News?
Yeah, of course. They're ridiculous.
You have said that at least, I'm going to quote you, at least half the Muslims around the world thinks it's okay to kill somebody if they insult the prophet.
Correct.
You believe that?
I think you could prove it. I've been talked to every Muslim around the world, but this is what the point I was making is that when I had Salman Rushdie on our show Friday night, and I was introducing a concept I called 9/11 liberals. We used to hear about 9/11 conservatives, the people like Ron Silver and Dennis Miller who became very conservative after the attack. Okay, 9/11 liberals are people like myself, Salman, Christopher Hitchens was one, Ayaan Hirsi Ali, Sam Harris. People who are liberal in almost every other way. We would be with the liberals on almost every other topic. But when it comes to this topic, liberals, I think, have very fuzzy thinking. And they say things like, all religions are alike. No, they're not. No, they're not. As Sam Harris made the point, and I've read it since, I think Nick Kristof also did the other week, that the Book of Mormon I just saw, you know, it's a musical about the Mormon religion that's, you know, scathing in its criticism. Well, try to do that about Muhammad. Try to do the Book of Muhammad and see what happens. As Sam Harris said, can you imagine the kind of security you would need around that theater? And the point is that, when liberals say, well, it's only a few people who when there's a riot about the cartoons of Muhammad or burning the Quran, it's only a few people, a relatively small number in the street. That's true. There may be a relatively small number in the street, but if you went and asked Muslims all around the world, do you think it's okay to bring violence on someone who insults the Prophet? Yes, I think you would get an extraordinary percentage of them who said, yes, that is one area where it is okay to bring violence on someone. You cannot insult the Prophet. And we will never, ever be able to get along unless we come to grips with this idea that they do not understand what free speech is. Free speech means free speech unfettered.
You have any Muslim friends?
Yeah, I do.
What do they say when you say that?
They say, I'm glad you said that.
Really?
Yeah, because there are Muslims here in America. That's why they came to America, to get away from that stupid shit.
Okay, so you really think that half the...
Well, read Ayaan Hirsi Ali in Newsweek last week.
I read that, yeah.
Yeah, that's what she says.
Yeah, she said that.
And she, I think, knows better than you or I do. But yes, I mean, I know this anecdotally from the people I talked to when I was making the movie Religulous. I mean, we talked to a Muslim rapper in London, English guy, but a Muslim, and he was very upset about his rights of free speech being abridged because he had a rap song that was sort of like, had lyrics about blowing shit up, which, the authorities thought was a little too incendiary. But at the same time, he would not, as much as I tried to get him to say that it is wrong to kill someone for insulting the Prophet. No. Somehow his mind walled that off. It's an amazing cognitive dissonance that you could be, on the one hand, protesting that they will not allow you your free speech to make a rap song about blowing shit up, and on the other side say, well, I'm sorry, you know what, if they insult the Prophet, he's got what's coming. That's free speech that goes too far.
What do you think of the Prophet?
I mean, like any other religious figure who's, 2,000 years ago was Jesus and 1,400 years ago. Who knows? Who knows if they even lived? I don't think Jesus lived. More and more, the more I read about it, the more I think I'm not sure there ever was even a historical Jesus. Because first of all,
Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John were all...
Well, first of all, those
after his time, yeah.
Yes, from 40 to 70 years after Jesus died. So Jesus dies in 33 A.D. The first gospel is 70 A.D. Paul is the one in the middle. Paul wrote in the 50s. But when Paul wrote about Jesus, he didn't know anything about Jesus. The only thing he knew about Jesus was that he died and was resurrected. He didn't know anything about his ministry. He didn't know about the trip to Jerusalem. He didn't know about his family, nothing. So how come Jesus dies in 30, and then for 40 years everybody forgot? No one knew anything about Jesus, and in 70, somehow they remembered again what happened with this guy, Jesus Christ. I mean, the Gospels were not intended to be history. They were intended to convince people to join a religion. And they used the biography of many other gods that had preceded Jesus.
Bill Maher's our guest, the host of Real Time. Back with more after this. We're back with Bill Maher, the host of Real Time with Bill Maher on HBO. About the media and the coverage, you have your thoughts on the birther issue. You criticized the Tom Brokaw for helping keep the birther myth alive. You wrote on your blog it was a failure of people like Tom Brokaw to dismiss it as racism. Do you think Donald Trump is a racist?
Well, I mean, it depends on how you term racist. I mean, it's funny how racism has evolved in America. I mean, 150 years ago, a racist was a guy who said, yes, I'm going to be keeping my slaves. 100 years ago, racism was Jim Crow. Somebody who believes that blacks perhaps shouldn't be allowed to vote, but maybe they are not for going all the way back to slavery. Now, I think, to me, where racism is today, it's denying that racism exists. That, to me, is very racist. If you ask the people on Planet Teabag, what's the problem racially in America? It's probably reverse racism, Larry. That's where the problem is. White people who cannot get a break because of all these affirmative action laws, they really believe that. So is Donald Trump a racist? Not an overt one, as he has said many times. The black people love me. Or the blacks. Remember he made that comment? The blacks love me. And by the way, they love being called the blacks also. So he's one of those racists who doesn't know he's a racist. But yes, he is.
So the whole birther issue to you was inflamed by the media.
Well, I remember when, well, no, I don't think I said that. I think I said what the media did with it was, as usual,
Ran with it.
Well, ran with it, but also never understood it. I remember in the 2008 election, during the election, they did something on, I think it was the state of Pennsylvania, where it was reported that 12% of the people in Pennsylvania told a pollster to his face, they were, quote, not ready for a black president. And the media treats this neutrally, not ready. Did you find any racism there? Oh, no, Brian, just people who were not ready. Nothing racist here. It's a completely emotional issue. They're locked in their trailer. They took a Midol, and they may be ready tomorrow to have stomach the sight of a black man getting on Air Force One. But right now, they're just not ready. I mean, this is ridiculous. Not ready is racist. That's what it should mean and does mean. And I remember when I first saw in 2008 the birther issue come up on blogs and so forth. I said, wow, that is some really racist shit going on there. Fringe stuff. Well, somehow that fringe stuff got to be believed by at least half of the rank and file of the Republican Party. At least half of them will say they are absolutely sure he's not American, or certainly not sure that he is. Can't say for sure, He feels foreign. They know that, feels foreign.
What do you feel about all this? Like this, we can't get together on anything. I remember, I used to be able to name everybody in the United States Senate. And I remember guys like Dirksen and others who would come together. You could call them in, talk to them about things.
Yeah, well,
Lyndon Johnson said to Dirksen, on the Civil Rights Bill, vote for it because it's right.
Yeah, but you have to understand, Everett Dirksen was a liberal Republican. That doesn't exist anymore. This is a party that does not have liberals or even moderates. So part of the problem is the Republican Party cannot even agree with itself of 10 or 20 years ago. So how can you get anything done? 20 years ago, the Republican Party was for the very health care bill that got passed. It was basically Bob Dole's old plan. It's not like the Democrats asked for a single payer. They certainly didn't even ask for a public option. Okay? It's a business-friendly bill. It's a big blowjob to the insurance companies and the drug companies. So the Republicans should have been for that. That's their idea of legislation, business-friendly. But they weren't. Or take global warming. 20 years ago, Bush the First, acid rain, passed cap and trade. That's, again, a Republican idea, business-friendly. Somehow now it got to be global warming doesn't even exist. It's a hoax. How can you negotiate with the party that won't even agree with itself?
In the 40s, the environment was a Republican issue.
In the 20s, race was a Republican issue.
Yeah, you're right.
They were the friend of the black man.
More with Bill Maher after this. We're back with Bill Maher. I didn't know that you bought a piece of the New York Mets.
Absolutely. I'm Mr. Met, Larry.
Mr. Met. Why did you make that investment?
I think it's a great investment. And you know what? Everybody told me not to do it because the Mets were in such trouble because of the Madoff. They were getting sued by
Freddie Wilpond's a dear friend, the owner of the Mets.
Yes, I've met him. I think he's a terrific
Great guy.
Okay.
But you invested.
They were selling. It's very rare that a sports team sells off a piece of itself.
Correct.
But I read it right in the New York Times last December. It said the New York Mets are selling 40% of the team. They need to raise cash. And I said, this is a great opportunity. I mean, more than realist, everything else I think can go to shit.
The value goes up.
Of every sports franchise.
Correct.
George Steinbrenner bought the Yankees in 1973 for $10 million, and if they were sold today, it would be at least $4 billion. And everybody told me not to do it, and then I did it anyway. And then the Dodgers sold for $2.15 billion.
Which immediately increased the value of the Mets.
Absolutely. But everyone said the highest the Dodgers would go for would not be more than $1.5 billion.
So you, Bill,
$2.15 billion.
You are a shrewd investor. You are not part of the 47%.
No, I'm not.
Yet you will.
But I came from the 47%. By the way, when you talk about the 47%, if you're talking about people who don't pay taxes, GE and 10 other giant corporations did not pay taxes in 2010 and a number of other recent years. So they're part of the freeloaders as well. GE, can you imagine paying no taxes? For God's sake, strippers pay more taxes, and they work at night in the dark and get paid in the...
Other things. You recently interviewed Lance Armstrong. I've had him on a few times a long time ago. How do you balance his apparent guilt of juicing up to ride bicycles and win the Legions of Merit and everything they win in France, and all he's done for cancer research?
Here's how I do it, Larry. I don't give a fuck. It's about,
tell me about
it's
that.
about riding a bicycle, something I did when I was 11. I don't care if he's on Honey Boo Boo's Go-Go Juice. I really don't care. He seemed like a nice guy. I know him to hang out with a couple of times. I'm glad he does work for charity. And as far as riding a bicycle and what you have to do it,
But there are rules. It's an athletic competition.
Really, is it? And so is running around the block. It's riding a bicycle, Larry. I can't.
Right against each other up hills, going.
I don't even care about if the athletes want to do it. I don't care about that either. If if people
there's a lot to be said.
want to watch a roided-up millionaire knock each other's heads off, that's what they want to do. That's freedom, Larry. Don't try to take away my freedom, Larry.
So in other words,
that's my freedom to watch it, and that's their freedom to do
I'm
it.
inclined to agree with you on steroids, but if you want to harm yourself and you know the danger, I don't think the fan cares.
Right. I mean, it's unfair to the other players who don't do it.
Unless they all have the right to do it if they want, right? If you made it legal, then you could do it.
But I've had this argument with Bob Costas.
Me too.
About steroids and
Bob is wacko on this subject.
Well, I mean, he's a purist.
And
when I said my argument with Bob was, I said, there has never been any constancy in the game. What about the fact that up until 1947, they did not have to compete against black players? That changed the game a lot. They used to wear a little mitten. Right? I mean, there was no...
Correct.
You see these gloves now, they're giant. There was no relief pitchers. There was no night games.
No specialists, yeah.
Yeah. So...
Well, I share your view on that.
Okay.
Costas is a purist. Well, I'm a purist in the... I don't like the DH.
I don't like the DH either.
So that's purist. We're purists in that regard.
Well, yes, absolutely. But also the DH really throws the game out of balance. It just does. It's not the way the game is supposed to be played.
There's a story in Newsweek this week, I mentioned cancer and Lance Armstrong, that we spend 100 times more on war than on finding a cure for cancer.
Oh, I'm sure.
As a government. Isn't that weird?
And everything else. I mean, that's the one part of the budget that they don't even want to examine. It's perfect the way it is. Every penny, apparently, according to Mitt Romney. In fact, we should make it even bigger. Really, could we just go line by line and see, do we really need to spend? Because a lot of it is for fighting the Soviets in 1978. That's what a lot of our defense, billions and billions. It's a jobs program, and it's corporate pork. It's for defense contractors. It has nothing to do with actually defending America.
Would you go to war over Iran?
No.
Would you preempt Iran?
Well, I don't know what that means.
Well, would you support Israel if it bombed Iran's nuclear reactor?
Well, I don't know even by support. There's not much we can do if they bomb it.
Would you publicly support it?
I would say they have, I understand the neighborhood that Israel lives in. I understand why they would want to do it. I would also say they may be making a worse case for themselves by doing it. I do not think that the Iranian regime is insane. I think there are people in Iran who are insane, as there are people everywhere insane. But I don't think that they want to see their nation obliterated, which is, they must know what would happen if they ever tried anything. And if they did try to obliterate Iran, I would certainly support us retaliating for Israel.
We have done a two-parter. Our last part of our two-parter is coming up, and we have questions
and the
for...
cliffhanger.
The cliffhanger for Bill after this. We're back with our remaining moments with Bill Maher. We have some social media questions for you, but you're going back into acting, huh? You're going into acting.
What?
You're going to be a guest on an upcoming episode of The Good Wife.
No. Oh, Larry, who gives you this
I have
bullshit?
wrong information?
Acting. You know, people as
I've been in 22 movies, but I play myself.
That's
not
exactly. That's what I'm doing. I'm playing you. No, I'm doing exactly what you've done.
It's not acting.
I'm lending verisimilitude
I see.
to a production. But no, I would never go back to that. Are you kidding? Getting up in the morning, putting on makeup, memorizing lines. Ugh.
Facebook and Twitter questions. Andy Hoffman on Facebook wants to know your favorite United States president.
George Washington.
Really?
Well, there would be no others without him. I mean, George Washington truly earned that name, the father of our country.
Could have been king. Right?
Could have been king. I mean, that's only one of the great things he did. But, you know, he also just had the knowledge when he was fighting the Revolutionary War that we could never defeat the British militarily. But as long as he kept that army alive, as long as they just existed, there was the hope. It was hanging by the thinnest of threads, and he did that. He only fought 9 battles in the Revolutionary War, and he only won 3. But he kept that army going. He just kept running, but he kept them alive.
Well taken. My account 101 wants to know, what do you think George W. Bush's presidency would have looked like without Katrina or 9/11? Successful or unsuccessful? It's hard to answer.
Well, you know, you say, gee, what would Bush be like if Bush wasn't a giant fuck-up? Less of a giant fuck-up? I mean, he still would have, completely rat-fucked the economy. He still would have passed, I'm sure, his tax cuts for the rich and not paid for anything, which pretty much put us into the economic hole that we're in.
Tom Sampson on Facebook, what do you view as your greatest achievement on the air and your greatest regret?
My greatest achievement is staying on, which is 20 years now, basically. Next year, this year was my 20th year, if you add
ABC.
Politically Incorrect plus Real Time.
You have a regret?
I have regrets every Friday night after the show. I mean, I never understand these people who say, I have no regrets. Like, are you human? How could you not have regrets? I mean,
of course.
I always feel like I could do something better. I feel like I could, in fact, the question you asked me in the last segment about a rant, I could so do that question better right now. I regret 5 minutes ago, Larry. That's how much I regret.
You did screw up that answer.
Yeah, I
but
really
it's
did.
okay. Well, maybe we'll let it out, maybe we won't. Okay. I love you, Bill. J. Michael on Facebook wants to know, do you believe atheism is a religion?
Of course not.
Well, it's a group with a common belief.
No, it's not. We did a whole, you know what, look up, I'm sure you can somehow look up on your Google or one of your technological innovations there, the editorial we did at the end, at the end of our show about 6 months ago or a year ago, we answered this question better than I could now, because I worked on it very hard that week, this nonsense that atheism is a religion. Atheism is a religion, I think we said, like abstinence is a sex position. It's a stupid question. And I liked it better when the questions came over, we could hear them in our headset with the callers.
Okay,
Des Moines, you're on the air.
This is a good question.
I missed that.
Morrissey 59 wants to know about your childhood. What shaped your social and political views, do you think? What was
my parents, I think. My father was a newsman in radio newsman.
Mutual Radio Network.
Mutual Network, yes, you know it well. And so politics was something that was discussed in my house, unlike, I think, most American families. I think European families, that's a cafe society. They don't watch TV. They sit in cafes and talk to each other. Crazy idea. It was a little more like what my household was like. We did talk about politics, and I knew what was going on, and I took an interest early on.
Do you text?
Of course.
Why? It's so impersonal. Why do you?
Texting is the innovation I love the most.
Because you can cop out.
I never liked talking on the phone that much, I never liked yammering on the phone with people. And if you have something to say, it's like you just say it in a few little words, get the message across.
But there's no personal...
Well, that's for later. I'll meet you later, and then you have the personal.
Bill, as always.
Great to see you, Larry.
Great
I missed
seeing
you.
Man. Me too. I miss you. Thanks to my guest, Bill Maher. His show, Real Time with Bill Maher, weekly on HBO. And you can find me on Twitter at King's Things. See you next time on Larry King Now.